journalist and author Christy O'Connor, and a rebel who went down fighting last Sunday.
Off his left-hand side and straight over the bar. Really good play by Paudie O'Sullivan. He's strong, he's inventive, he's got a very good finish.
Yes, a warm welcome to Eamonn, Paudie and Christy, and to you at home as well. Paudie, you had a good game yourself on Sunday, but now that you've had time to reflect, what do you think went wrong?
Yeah, I suppose obviously Sunday went well enough for first half, Marty, but I think we kind of dragged ourselves into a battle in the second half maybe that we didn't set out to be in, or we certainly didn't want to be in. Do you know, I think we maybe lost our shape a small bit in the second half, unfortunately. Do you know, as I said in the first half, we were playing the brand of hurling that we wanted to be playing. Do you know, moving the ball fast, picking out the man in the right position, but do you know, second half, as I said, we kind of lost our shape, but then again, the other side of that is you have to give credit to Galway. They probably went in at half-time and maybe got a few choice words from their manager about the space we were getting, and you know, certainly they definitely tightened it in the second half.
Eamonn, Cork have a lot to build on, haven't they, for 2013?
Yeah, Cork had a good season. I mean, getting to an Ireland semi-final, I think they did play probably their best hurling actually for about 30 minutes in that game. And then, as Paudie said, the second half, the game went away from them, and sort of Galway defended well and sort of ran out 5-point winners. But you know, Cork can take a lot from the season. A lot of young players, particularly on the forward line. You know, they still need to find some players, I think, to get to the next step, but that's their challenge for the next season, I think.
Christy, I'm sure you know the way Anthony Nash has felt being sub-goalkeeper for so long, like you were indeed in Clare with Davy Fitz. But considering his performance and Don Logue Cusack coming back next year, what do you think will happen in Cork?
Yeah, Anthony did a super year. I suppose when you wait that long, Marty, for a chance, you really embrace it, and you know, you get the opportunity to show maybe what you felt you couldn't prior to that. But no, Don Logue will come back stronger, and I think that will, you know, bring out the best of Anthony, and you know, Don Logue will relish the challenge. Anthony will, and you know, the one thing that has always really impressed me about the Cork lads is there's a real brotherhood there amongst those keepers, and they all drive one another on, and they're all in it together. And yeah, it's going to be interesting because you know, Don Logue, you know, he said that you know, he wants to come back. Anthony's got a taste of it now, he won't want to let it go, so yeah, interesting times. Interesting
indeed. Well, we'll be talking more hurling later, but right now we're going to take a look at a broader issue that faces the GAA. Despite the recession, the huge amounts of money being spent in preparation of county teams continues. But are some counties in danger of needing a big bailout? Marie Crowe of the Sunday Independent thinks it may be time to rein things in.
I don't care too much for money, money can't buy me love.
Money can't buy you love, but if you look at the spending of GAA county boards, it could, just maybe, buy you a provincial championship or two. When you're chasing success these days, nothing is left to chance and no expenses spared. Now more than ever, we know the cost of running an inter-county team, and we've seen the knock-on effects of big spending reported over the last few months. Last year, Kildare's county board poured almost €800,000 into their team's preparations, but they were essentially bailed out by Croke Park to the tune of $300,000 in April. This year, Tipperary were spending 25 grand a week on 6 of their inter-county teams, and there are lots more examples. Many county boards are in dire financial straits, and massive monthly outgoings for inter-county teams aren't helping. Mayo are over 10 million in the red, Wexford owe 3 million and counting, and Waterford are $500,000 in debt. Ironically, for the counties spending their way to success, the bill is going to get bigger and bigger. It's hard to blame modern-day managers for their extravagances. They're under pressure from all directions. But high-tech equipment and teams of experts don't come cheap. Maybe it's time someone shouted stop before counties get themselves into more trouble. Should Croke Park put a cap on inter-county spending? Is it fair that a county can buy their way to these expertise and improve their teams way beyond what other counties can afford? Is all that money swishing around some inter-county teams eventually going to be bad for our games? With debt rising in most counties, top-level hurling and football is becoming a risky and expensive business. Teams now need to spend more efficiently instead of just spending big. It's getting out of control, and if something isn't done soon, the GAA will find out that more money really does mean more problems.
Yes, interesting stuff from Marie Crowe there. Christy, some of the figures that Marie mentions are just quite staggering. Can you give us a sample of what some counties are spending in terms of team preparations?
Yeah, Dublin topped the list last year, Marty. It was, you know, over 1.7 million. Cork came in at 1.4, I think. But you know, you look at, we say Dublin last year, their minor hurlers, their under 21 hurlers got to All Ireland finals. Their senior hurlers got to league final. Minor footballers got to an All Ireland final. So you know, it's not just the senior team. I suppose Dublin have a big sponsorship deal as well with Vodafone. They're able to generate revenue, I suppose, that other counties can't. And then I suppose you look at the other end of the scale, likes of Fermanagh, who came in 32nd, and they spent you know, 158 grand less last year. But the other side of that is that there was effectively a player revolt in Fermanagh last year, because the template that was there under Malachy O'Rourke, that, you know, they got to an Ulster final replay in 2008. The team never really built on that. I suppose there was a lot of transition there. But the players effectively revolted when John O'Neill took over, and the county board, I suppose, redrew the boundaries, you know, serious cost-cutting measures, and the players weren't accepting, or they didn't accept that. So that's the problem, I suppose, really. Players now are, you know, the GA is all but professional in every aspect, so players are used to, from colleges level, club level, they're used to the best, and when, you know, those costs are cut, I suppose the difference is, or the real kernel is the difference between cost-cutting and just slashing budgets, because players are used to professional standards and they want to maintain that.
It's some amount of money though, Christy, and I know you're involved in inter-county teams as well, but in some instances, is it out of control?
It possibly is in some counties. I suppose, you know, you will say that every manager wants the best for his team, his players. There's no doubt that some spending probably has been reckless, and even Marie's point there is maybe a possibility for some teams to pull ahead of other counties. Like, you know, I remember even Pat Tean from Offaly saying once before that, you know, if the Offaly hurler spent what Tip spent, you know, the men in the white coats be looking for them. So, you know, they maybe don't have the resources to compete. But, you know, the other side of that is every manager wants to, you know, try and be successful, and that doesn't come cheap.
Eamonn, as a coach, do you think it's necessary to spend that amount of money to be successful?
Well, I think you have to start, Marty, with what you know, what's your objective, and all counties want to win, either want to win the championship match or want to win the championship. And in a sense, it's up to county boards really to make sure that the spending, that they make these investment decisions wisely. It's not up to managers or coaches. The manager or coaches go with the blueprint and say, this is what's necessary. The decision then by county boards is whether they appoint these managers or whether they make the judgment that this is working. And I think that to me it's imperative that the county boards keep control of the overall objectives of a county, because there are multiple objectives in a county. And that's not just winning the All-Ireland. I mean, the club situation, sort of not just the adult, big time way. So it's a question of whether you're getting value for money, in my view, and whether you're getting value money from your, well, in Tipperary, you know, you don't. We had a moral contract with Tipperary. We didn't. The management team, you know, simply had you know, we didn't get paid or anything like that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think it's really important that somebody is watching what is exactly happening here, rather than have managers going off on individual sort of decisions on the senior hurling team. And it's happening at club as well, Marty, because, you know, clubs are making decisions to pay managers, and who's watching over the value for money for that?
So it needs to be monitored.
It needs to be monitored, and somebody has to take control of that.
Paudie, what do you think?
Well, I suppose from a player's perspective, Marty, you know, the game has gone so professional at the moment. I think, you know, I'm not sure what the stats are saying, but I would imagine a lot of that money is going into back rooms. You know, nowadays some teams might have sports psychologists, masseuses, physios. You know, I certainly know from my own perspective how lucky we are with the physio we have. I mean, a couple of us had a couple of injuries this year, and I think in this day and age, you just can't be without that kind of help from these professionals. You know, masseuse is there as well. It might sound, you know, maybe a bit fancy for amateur players, but, you know, Eamonn referred to prevention of injuries, and all these type of fellas certainly help. But, you know, as he said, the last thing we want is, you know, the bigger counties having an unfair advantage because, say, Cork, Dublin, they have bigger sponsorships. You know, we don't want to go down the road of maybe the Premier League, where the most teams with the most budget are the team winning the trophies every year. You know, I think for the GA, that would be an absolute disaster, and, you know, something what now is probably not my job to say, but something has to be done on that front.
It's not all about expenditure streams, it's revenue streams as well. And it's in county boards also have responsibility to bring in revenue. So in other words, they have to be efficient in organising their club matches, making sure that club matches are well attended, marketing the club matches, and getting the best value from the, for example, sponsorship. And that's an issue. In other words, you can look at the expenditure side, but you also have to look at the revenue side of how the games in the county are organised. So for example, keeping your county hurling championship and trying to run it off in September or October, to me, doesn't make sense. But you want to be running your county championship at a time where you maximise the revenue, you know, from, say, Cork's success this year, or, you know, it needs to be going concurrently, you know what I mean? And you have to keep an eye on the revenue side, and I don't think we've been good at that, actually. And in particular, of maximising returns from sponsors, from sponsorship deals. I think we could generate a lot more revenue.
We saw Kildare's figures this year and having to get a bailout from Croke Park of 300,000, I think it was. Is that going to be the norm, do you think?
I don't think so. You know, I suppose Kildare possibly an isolated example in one sense, given that they have a watchdog effectively now, and Simon Moroney, the former Munster Council Secretary, he's kind of, as Eamonn said, that's his role now, just to kind of oversee what's happening. I suppose there is probably greater frustration in Kildare, Marty, given that they haven't had success. They've pumped huge money in. You know, their grounds, their county grounds in Newbridge is not in great shape. Frustration with that. You know, the Kildare players then, you know, over the last, I suppose, few years, they have raised the guts of 100 grand themselves. They kitted out the old media centre in the K Club. That's where they do their strength and conditioning training. So there's that side of it. I suppose the other side then is the frustration with, you know, the lack of success. You know, people maybe just over expenditure. Like, you know, like they went on a 10-day trip to Portugal at a time when this bailout broke, which didn't, you know, wasn't a good PR. You know, for them, you know, then you'd hear stories of, you know, the players having different training gear for every day of the week out there, and then you balance that then with the other side, where the Kildare under 21 hurlers, after their Leinster under 21 final this year, apparently they didn't have the money to pay for a meal. So there is that frustration whereby the senior team, you know, get maybe, you know, okay, they enjoy the profile, they create most of the revenue, but you know, I think as Eamonn said, it's wrong when it's like clubs. You know, you're paying out to a manager and you forget your minor club, and there's no money pumped into those resources.
Paudie, just before we move, do you think Croke Park were right to give the bailout?
I think, to be honest, it's a dangerous enough precedent to be setting, Marty. I mean, obviously they couldn't let Kildare high and dry, but you know, the figures there about, I think Mayo are in debt. You know, you hear a lot of stories about Waterford. I mean, do you know what's to stop those two county boards tomorrow morning sending a letter or going to Croke Park and, you know, asking for some sort of money or payout themselves? And, you know, I think that's a hard question then for the GA to say no to, as in they've given it to Kildare. You know, what's wrong with Waterford, what's wrong with Mayo that we can't get that same?
Well, in fairness to Croke Park, you can see why they did it.
Well,
I'm sure.
I think one point, though, important point, Marty, is that you have to ask maybe, you know, some counties, are they getting a fair slice of the cake? So you look at the two teams on Sunday, Tip, Kilkenny, like whoever loses that game is, you know, their season is over, but they will effectively get travel expenses for the weekend. When you look at the amount of revenue they will create for Sunday, you know, the GA is a massive industry now in terms of marketing, sponsorship, corporate, all that. You know, teams that, you know, they're not going to accept communist values in a capitalist state. I'm
sure there's going to be a lot of debate over the winter months as well, and we could talk about it all night, lads. Well, they certainly didn't spend as much money in 1991 when Tipperary played Kilkenny in the All-Ireland hurling final, nor were they the familiar foes they are today.
While we were favourites going into that game, we knew that we were going to have a hell of a match. Favourites tag doesn't really enter the equation when Tip and Kilkenny meet. After '89, you know, the county was full of hope, but we were full of doubt. You know, we encountered a few injuries and we found ourselves with very few replacements. And as a result, Cork beat us in 1990. There was a resolution and a resolve there from all the players. We were going to come back.
So the final underway.
You play hurling like you tug of war. Good tug of war teams, they lean on the rope for the first couple of minutes. They test the opposition. They do everything kind of unspectacular, if you like. but they do everything safe and they do everything hard. That has always been my approach. Don't be looking for the fancy stuff in the first 10 or 15 minutes. Let the game take its shape.
John Lahey. That's the opening point of the match.
We didn't want to give Kilkenny any encouragement about the problems that we faced behind closed doors. We had a few injuries. Nick English, Cormac Bonner, they were the mainstay of the scoring machine we had. Every ball was important to us, and I think we used every ball wisely in that All-Ireland.
Pat Fox, heavily bandaged left knee. On to Michael Cleary, and they've got another one in the space of a minute, and we're back to just a 1-point difference.
Kilkenny, if anything, should have led by more in the first 35 minutes.
Taking the shoulder from Bobby Ryan with great confidence. Oh, that's a super play by Eamonn Morrissey.
We were lucky enough to be 9 points all at half-time.
They're level, and Cleary has done it.
Our approach always in the dressing room was that of confidence and encouragement. Like, half-time in the dressing room in Croke Park isn't a place to upset one's confidence. Kilkenny didn't look like getting that goal they needed, and we did. The real turning point in the game was the free and the goal that Michael Cleary got.
He's got a goal! A goal! A speculative shot by Michael Cleary.
He'll tell you he went for the goal in his own cocky way, and I'm not sure whether he did or not. Like, it slipped into the top left-hand corner, and you know, it was certainly a relief for me on the sideline, a relief for every Tipperary player and every Tipperary supporter.
Liam Welch, robbed, Pat Fox, that may seal it now. Magnificently put over the bar by Pat Fox, and that may be, as they say, the insurance point for Tip.
Fox again to get the last point was icing on the cake. When you go 4 points up on All-Ireland Day, it's a marvellous place to be. The crowd are so ferocious and so loud. They actually bring you home.
Michael Welch, it's all over and Tipperary have won the All-Ireland.
That was one of the hardest All-Irelands you could ever hope to win. All my ambitions were fulfilled after '91.
Tipperary, the premier team in hurling this year.
Yes, Babs Keating there, great stuff indeed. And of course, unlike that game, the meeting between Tipperary and Kilkenny on Sunday comes on the back of 3 All-Ireland finals in a row. Eamonn, in your experience as a coach, when two teams know each other this well, as they do over these two Tipperary and Kilkenny teams, how does that manifest itself in terms of preparing the team?
Well, it's true that Tipperary and Kilkenny know each other, but it's very, very important to take every game on its merits. You know, every day you go to play, it's going to be a different match. So, you know, you forget about 2010 or 2009 or 2011. You just go to play the game. If you can approach the game like that, rather than be building it up into this is the third, fourth time we meet them, and I'm sure, for example, both teams are probably looking on this as how they perform, not about the opposition. And I think probably if you go into a big match like that, working on the basis of your own strengths, I think it's probably the way most teams approach matches. So I don't think previous games should have, if both teams are prepared, you know, as they are properly, it won't have a huge bearing. And there is a great rivalry between Tip and Kilkenny, you know, and the supporters love that. But mostly the players tend to leave that aside, you know, and tend to see the matches as what it is, a real challenge, you know. So I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters that much, although, you know, it does have its history, you know, for sure.
Paudie, let's talk about Tipperary, because you know them well from playing against them. Their strengths and weaknesses, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think their strengths over the last couple of years has been their ability with their forwards to get scores and to create goal chances. You know, if you even look at the 2 or 3 games they've played this year, I think our game in particular, they got a great goal out of nothing in that game, and in such a tight game. That was the difference between winning and losing. I think if you look again to the Munster final, they got 2 goals, whereas Waterford probably had more goal chances in that game, but they didn't manage to convert any. And I think again, in the end of that game, that was the difference again. you know, I think their back line as well has tightened up considerably. You know, I think there maybe was a bit of question about it after the Cork game, which I could tell you now that wasn't the case. But you know, I think with Paul Curran there, I think he's probably one of the most underrated defenders in the country, and I think he, as captain of the team, he really leads the rest of the lads.
And what
around
about a
him.
weakness?
Do
you see any?
I think it's hard to pick out a weakness in a way. I suppose, you know, I referred to their full back line there. You know, I certainly wouldn't agree with that. But I think the way Kilkenny play the game, and that is a full back line. They always target the full back line. You know, I think that's where most of the scoring will be done around Sunday. You know, if you look at the players Kilkenny will have in there, I think they'll be trying to target that area as much as possible.
Christy, do we dare to say that Kilkenny are gone back a little bit, considering that they were troubled by Limerick and beaten by Galway?
I think maybe a little bit, Marty. I suppose the Dublin game, you know, Dublin were so poor, that was proven against Clare. I think the big thing for Sunday and that has impacted on Kilkenny is their bench. If you look at, we'll say even the Limerick game, like TJ Reid came on for, like, you know, it was devastating when he came on. Scored 11 plays, was involved in the creation of 5 points. You know, you would think that TJ Reid will start now on Sunday, but you know, I suppose it's been shown really that he's probably better to come in when the play is loosened up. So when you look at Tips or Kilkenny's bench now, like if they do start TJ Reid, like the last day, Killian Buckley and Matthew Root were the only 2 forwards with championship experience. When you compare that to the Tip bench, Owen Kelly, Seamus Callanan, John O'Neill, Gerard Ryan, you know, like Tip have options now that maybe that Kilkenny had in the past. So when you say Kilkenny have gone back, I would say that, okay, obviously it's huge mileage on the clock. The question is, have they the hunger? That'll be, I suppose, seen on Sunday. But I think the bench could be the critical factor on Sunday, because Kilkenny don't have the options now that they had.
I was behind on the terraces when Kilkenny played Limerick, and you know, although Kilkenny were under pressure for some of that game, I just saw that they still had hunger to win that game. And I was just looking at their top players, I was looking at their forwards, and even though things weren't going, you know, entirely well for them, they were still wanted to win that game. And you know, it's very, you know, when you see a team like that, I'm not so sure about the mileage and the hunger.
Well, they've definitely gone into siege mentality mode as well since the Leinster final. The gates have been locked at training. You know, like they really are. Like Paudie, you know, went to town on them after the Limerick game. You know, went to town on them at half time. So, you know, look at, I suppose Tip have wanted one team all year. This is it. Kilkenny will want to lay down their mark as well, because there's a feeling that if they're beaten on Sunday, this could be the end of this team.
In a word, Tipperary or Kilkenny?
I think Tip, because of the bench.
What about you, Paudie?
I'd have to say Kilkenny at the prospect of meeting Galway in an All-Ireland final.
It's all right, Eamonn. I'll show you of the casting
What
vote.
other word could I have?
Has to be.
Has to be.
Tipperary, all right. Well, thanks very much, guys. Of course, you can watch that game on Sunday between Tipperary and Kilkenny, as well as the All-Ireland